Chapter 5. I don't remember exactly how the books were introduced to me, but the Left Behind series had become very popular. Everyone was talking about them. Now that I think about it, it might have even been my soon-to-be mother-in-law that introduced them to me. I think she had started reading them. Anyway, she ends up talking me into reading the first book. There ended up being 16 books in all, and before I stopped reading the series, I owned all of them. It was the first time in my life that I actually had a desire to read. I would read them every night after work. Sometimes I couldn't wait to get home just so I could see what was going to happen next. It completely consumed me. It was action-packed. It had mystery, it had love, it had killing, it had fear, it had domination, it had God, it had the devil, and it had the rapture. It had it all. The story was mainly about the events that took place in the book of Revelation, and of course the rapture, and it describes what it would probably look like when it happened. It built a story around some characters that saw the rapture happen around them as they missed the boat. They got left behind. The whole story is about what happens to them during the next 7 years as God's wrath is poured out on the earth. The Antichrist appears. The false prophet appears. And the whole book of Revelation is played out in vivid detail all the way to the very end when these characters experience Jesus coming back. Some survived to see that day. Some died during the tribulation by the hands of Nikolai, the Antichrist. I guess they got the name Nikolai from Revelation chapter 2:6, where Jesus talks about hating the deeds of the Nicolaitans. Nikolai pursued all the newfound believers, the new believers that had finally realized God was real. Only after seeing their friends and family disappear right before their eyes, leaving a pile of clothes. They even ended up making movies about them. I owned all of those too. They also started making acted-out audio versions on CD. This was a lifesaver for me. The drive to Pensacola and back went from being dreaded to being awesome. I began listening to those CDs during those trips, and I would get so enveloped into the story that my 4-hour trip felt more like 30 minutes. They did an amazing job acting out the characters, and with all the sound effects, it made me feel like I was watching a movie that didn't need a television. I could just see it in my mind. Sometimes I would pull up to her house and not remember any details about driving there other than what had happened in the story. The Left Behind books made a huge impact on what I believed. I had never read Revelation before. Heck, I had barely read anything in the Bible at all up to that point in my life. As far as I was concerned, these books represented what was going to happen. At one time, I had even looked up the biography of the writers of the books. They had this degree and that degree and theology degrees and all kinds of worldly acknowledgments. They looked like they should know their stuff, so I just assumed that if they wrote the books, they must have been as close as you could get to being accurate and truthful. After all, they sure appeared to be men of God. As far as I was concerned, there was going to be a rapture, and Revelation was going to play out almost just like what those Left Behind books said. I tried actually reading Revelation for myself, but it was just too hard to understand. Every time I would start reading about beasts with horns and creatures coming up out of the sea and creatures looking like they were put together with different parts of different animals and all the other crazy things stated in there, my mind would immediately start shutting off. My mind would discredit what I was reading. It started telling me that based on the realities of life, This kind of stuff was not possible. This was fairy tale stuff. It couldn't possibly be real. Kind of like where Jesus walks on top of the water out to a boat, or the part where Jesus raises someone from the dead that had been dead for 4 days, or where Jesus spoke to demons that were inside of people and had power over them. I could go on and on about different things that happened in the Bible, things that the world teaches us cannot happen. The law of physics tell us no. The law of the world tells us no. Almost the entire Bible describes things that our brain can't even grasp. We can't fathom it. We can't comprehend it because the world has taught us not to.